Welcome to the Jay Kim Show, Hong Kong's first dedicated podcast on investing in Asia. Join us as we survey the land and discover the greatest companies and most profitable investment opportunities in Asia. If this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. This podcast is produced every week with the goal of providing actionable insights to you, the listener, with every single episode. And now, on to the show. This week's show guest is Amit Saberwal, the founder and CEO of RedDoorz. RedDoorz is one of Southeast Asia's leading budget hotel online booking platforms. The company has a presence in Indonesia, Singapore, and the Philippines, and aims to tap into Southeast Asia's $52 billion travel market. With over 500 properties and servicing over 700,000 stayed room nights thus far in the region. Amit, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Jay.
So for the audience that's listening in and that hasn't heard of you or your company, maybe you can give us a little bit of an introduction.
Okay. So we're in Southeast Asia, as you rightly mentioned. We're a budget accommodation player, and you can think of us as a like Marriott for 2-star and below kind of hotels. And the other way to look at us is like Uber for these small properties, where we do the customer acquisition, branding, and the customer service for these small properties. Well, the properties have to deliver a level of service which is dictated by our brand standards.
Right. Okay. So, and maybe you could give a little bit of personal background as well, some color for our audience. How, what was your background? Where are you from? What did you, how did you start your career, and what led you down this path to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I was actually a hotelier by training, and so I went to hotel school, and then I had a reasonably long career with hotels in India. And by 2005, I was director of sales and marketing for a large boutique uh, hotel chain in India called the Park Hotels, and they ran, design-led hotels. Designed by people like Hirsch Bedner or Terence Conran, And then by 2005, I said, okay, this is getting a little boring. And the online travel scene was starting up in India. And I joined a company in the very, very early days called Make My Trip. And Make My Trip is India's leading online travel agency. That time, of course, very, very small company, like starting up for the Indian audience. And 2010, we IPO'd on NASDAQ, and it was $1 billion IPO.
Wow.
And I moved to Singapore to look after Southeast Asia expansion for Make My Trip. And then after about 8.5 years, and that was about 3 years or 3.5 years after our IPO, I decided that, okay, now it's now or never moment, and I should become an entrepreneur because I'm not getting any younger. And I was actually bored in this now $2 billion enterprise, which had kind of grown from small startup into a large corporation. So I just thought we should relight that fire. So I think a combination of many reasons, and I decided to become an entrepreneur. And we launched RedDoorz in Indonesia in July of 2015.
Very interesting. An interesting story about MakeMyTrip.com. Were you one of the founders there, or just on the founding team, leadership team?
Like chief business officer for the company. I wasn't one of the founders. I was an early employee,
Right.
but I kind of grew with the company, and I mean, it was an incredible experience. So by the time I left, I was chief business officer. I joined to run the hotel business for Make My Trip, which I continue to do till I left.
That's incredible. So you must have learned a lot during your time there, which probably helped translate over when you became an entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about how you came up. I mean, you told us a little bit about your journey and when you decided to jump out to be an entrepreneur. But what was it specifically that made you come up with this concept of Red Doors, and why did you choose Indonesia to launch your company?
Okay. So actually, I was at a unique position of being a hotelier by training and an online travel agent by profession. And I saw how the online travel agencies really grew. And of course, we built a lot of the business on first principle. But by the time we spent a few years and grew, make my trip exponentially, we had figured out that this is science more than art, and we invested heavily in technology, people, product, and of course, the rest is history, as you say. And I found that these smaller properties obviously had a big gap in this kind of technology play. So we actually started off by saying that, okay, what if we become the technology enabler for these small properties? And that was our starting point. And we said, okay, if the a single property or 10 properties can't afford either kind of product management or online technology, which say an OTA has, maybe 400 or 500 properties can afford. And let us be that back-end engine which actually drives business into these properties. So that was the starting point. That was the philosophy with which I started Red Door. Actually, as time went by, we figured out one thing very quickly, that the properties were still nameless and therefore could have a problem with getting discovered. And so that the brand came in. And when the brand came in, we could actually drive more customers into our RedDoorz branded properties and also make sure that they would repeat because the brand stood for a certain set of values. And we chose Indonesia because it was one of the most exciting, large markets in Southeast Asia, and also because it has a heavily or a very robust domestic travel ecosystem. What
Ah.
we decided to do that we should focus on Indonesia, and I think that was the right decision which we took.
Yeah, so I think for those in the audience that aren't familiar, Indonesia is one of the fastest and largest economies and fastest growing and largest economies in Southeast Asia. And what I didn't know, Amit, was what you just mentioned, that there was a large domestic travel market there. When you talked about properties there, you talked about individual properties. Does that mean like a single hotel? Or does that actually mean like a house or like a bed and breakfast type setup?
Yeah. So actually, these are commercially run small hotels. So you need to look at them like Motel 6 in the United States or thereabouts. These are not Airbnb kind of accommodation. That means one person, one unit, or one apartment. These are like commercially run establishments with between 20 and 90 rooms. So these are hotels, but they are just that they are budget hotels.
I see. And were these hotels, for the most part, profitable on their own?
Yes, they were. They were profitable in a way that the property owners were running them. Occupancy was about 50 odd percent, and mostly family owned. It's paid off, inherited kind of properties. So while profit was a definite incentive for property owners, but it wasn't that they were mortgaging the houses if they weren't making a lot of money. So the property was doing okay, we're doing well, and different properties were in different stages. But what we managed to do was when the properties joined the RedDoorz network, the average occupancy for our say Jakarta properties is 86%. So we kind of bump up the occupancies
Wow.
and the property owners start earning a lot more money, and they are happy to be part of a large network or a brand which is now very well recognized in the market. And so again, it's like a bit of like a franchising model
Mm-hmm.
in a way, except that our DNA is technology. So we think like a technology company, we execute like a technology company, but our enabler for growth is real estate, and in real estate is hotels and guest houses.
Right.
That's how we kind of a lot of people can understand this very clearly. If we draw a parallel to Uber, that means that Uber makes sure that the customer, the property or the asset owner, car owner in that case, gets customers. They do customer service. They vouch for the quality of their service, gives them an incentive. But Uber doesn't drive the car, right? The property owner drives the car.
That's
That's
right.
the fundamental premise of our business. Though there are various permutations and combinations, but that's the fundamental premise.
I see. Okay, so that makes it much more clear now, the Uber model, basically. So tell us a little bit, Amit, about the onboarding process. How do you select properties to come onto the Red Doors umbrella? What are the criteria? What are the economics like? Is there certain changes that need to be made fundamental to how Red Door presents themselves as far as the actual property goes and the branding and this sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I think, of course, this has evolved over a period of time. But I will tell you what the current state is right now.
Hmm.
One is that we have a very, very good demand forecasting engine. So what we do is we first forecast demand in a particular area. In a place like, say, some cities in Indonesia or Manila in the Philippines or Singapore, we break down the demand into a per square kilometer basis. That means that we would continue to add properties in a square kilometer till the demand is saturated for our kind of a property. So it's quite possible that in a mature city, there is 1 square kilometer, there are four red doors or even five for that matter. And therefore we think a little bit like an airline. That means we first forecast demand and then we scout for a property and then we tie up with that property. So typical property process would be, yeah, of course, scout the property which is kind of fits our bill, which is good physically but not doing outstandingly well. So it's in the kind of shoulder kind of kind of a property somewhere in the middle, and have a commercial arrangement with the property. We explain the concept to them. Of course, now there's a lot of incoming interest, but initially it was much tougher. But once they decide to come on board as Red Doors, then there is a huge sign outside which says Red Doors. All the rooms are branded as Red Doors. All the toiletries is Red Doors. The hotspot in the property, the Wi-Fi hotspot is the Red Doors hotspot. And so it's like any other hotel with I think the fundamental difference there also being that our brand promise to our customers is that you will get a clean room, a clean bathroom, absolutely spotless linen, free Wi-Fi, which is good quality, which is controlled by us. You'll get mineral water to drink, which might not be a big deal in many developed countries, but in some countries is an essential thing. And you'll get four-star quality branded toiletries of Red Dot. So the brand promise is simple but clean, and you will get it at a price which is like between $20 and $30 a night. So it's very, very good value for money. So what happens is that customers, once they experience that Red Doors brand experience, and mind you, we don't promise the Ritz, and we don't promise, but we promise a good night's sleep at a reasonable price. And customers like that,
Hmm.
they keep coming back to us again and again. You'll be surprised at our repeat rates. They're absolutely phenomenal. And so the properties are then kind of onboarded as Red Doors after a training program or three training program modules are delivered to the property staff. And then thereafter onwards, there is an ongoing check which happens where we can control the quality of service through set guardrails and a system which is tracking all the behavior which a property staff is supposed to do and overlaps it with the reviews which are coming from the property from the guests who are checking out of the property, and gives merit and demerit points to a particular property. And so what happens is that within a few weeks we get to know where what all improvements are required at the property, or whether a good property is starting to deliver bad service. And then our property operations team actually goes and intervenes at that property to make sure the service standards come right back up. So we don't actually deliver the service, like Uber doesn't hire the drivers to deliver the service, but we make sure that the service delivery quality is kept under check.
Right. That's an important aspect of it. I mean, especially because you want all anything under the Red Doors brand needs to be of at least similar quality. So a thing that you mentioned earlier, Amit, is basically, I mean, like you said, like free Wi-Fi. I think a lot of us take it for granted in developed countries. Mineral water, something as simple as clean water and clean sheets, and and toiletries. I mean, these are all things, basic essentials that we take for granted. But for a lot of people that haven't traveled to more emerging type markets, they don't actually realize how difficult it is to get a reasonably priced hotel that actually provides all this stuff. So the price
Yes,
point that you talked
20 and
about at
30. You
around,
can get it for
that's
20 also.
$30 US, was it? Um, yeah, that's extremely economical. And usually, what I find is that when I travel to some of the more emerging cities in Southeast Asia, the capital city will have one or two sort of 5-star type hotel room, and that's where everyone, all the sort of business travelers and tourists, will just go to those because that's the only option that they really have. And then there's a huge drop off in quality and everything else after that. So it sounds like RedDoorz is trying to close that. RedDoorz is trying to close that gap. You say that you provide, like the Wi-Fi hotspot and the linens and this sort of thing. So is that the franchising model then? Now does the hotel pay a franchising fee to RedDoorz?
The linen quality is dictated by us. The property owner buys that linen.
I
The
see.
hotspot vendor is controlled by us. The hotspot delivery happens by us, but the daily bill is paid or the monthly bill is paid by the property owner. So it's that kind of a model where we have these guardrails, but eventual whatever happens with the property and the payment for whatever happens with the property is paid by the property owner, with the exception of our signage, which is our branding outside the property, which is something which we are very particular about. And it is something which we want to pay because we can control the quality across various sites. That's the only thing we actually really invest in a property. Apart from that, is only technology, know how, training, and similar soft things.
I see. And then, as far as the revenue model that RedDoorz collects, how does that work? On after a property is onboarded to the RedDoorz platform, do you just take a percentage there of all future bookings?
Yes, that could be one of the options, but basically it's like a revenue share option with the property, and we kind of split. There could also be like a base revenue, which is kind of beyond which Red Door starts making money, and before that
Right.
we don't make money. So there are various permutation and combination, but they are all geared up for scaling quickly. So the typical franchise model will be like $20,000 brand fee, $30,000 marketing fee, so on and so forth, and 4% GOP or the GOP, 8% of room revenue, and that kind of stuff. So it's too complicated. We keep it simple. We tell the guy, listen, you're going to make X amount of money. That's our projection. And if you don't make anything till that amount of money, we don't make anything. But we once you get to that threshold, we keep a majority of that money, and you keep a little bit of the kind of profit share. And so what happens is that he's highly motivated because he has literally nothing to lose. On quickly onboard the property without getting into this huge discussion around pricing and all that. So we control the pricing, we control everything then beyond that.
That's fantastic. And as far as the user experience then now goes, I'm looking at your website right now. You have mentioned you guys are at the core. You guys are a technology company, and so for the user experience, I suppose if you're a traveler and you just want to find a room for the night or for a long stay. It's just like any other of those travel websites. You can just do a search for it, and you'll come up with selections. And I'm assuming there's like a social element with reviews that are associated with each property.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to take a step back here.
Hmm.
So Indonesia, 70% of our customers would book on RedDoorz.com. 30% would book through third-party affiliates, so on and so forth, travel agents, etc. 70% would book through RedDoorz.com. Out of the 70% of bookings that come through RedDoorz.com, 80% of them would come through our Android app. So all our focus is on the Android app. That's the first part of it. The
Ah,
second part of it is 95% of the total business will come on the mobile. That means the balance 15% will come either through the mobile website, which is the majority, and 5% of
mhm.
it will come through the iOS app, which is emerging, but Indonesia is Android country. So
Right.
that's the first part of it. So it looks like any other website, similar or app. However, with several differences, and if I want to take you through the nuances, one, based on your identity or your history, good history, you can pay at the property without any credit card. So in Indonesia, 12% of the people have credit cards. A lot of the other people use bank transfers, ATM transfers, and similar stuff to make the payments. But it is an irritant because we own the inventory. We said if a person is by and large likely to show up, why are we going to put these irritants in a system? If you have a good track
Right.
record, you can just go ahead and book and pay at the property, no questions asked. If you do not, and then we have a loyalty program called Red Cash. One in two of our customers use Red Cash in any given booking and any given day. The rest of them keep it for the future. So if you become a no-show, then not only do you lose your Red Cash, but you also cannot make a pay at hotel booking till you've made a couple of pay now booking.
Oh, I see.
So we've gone into that level. And the other thing is a lot of our customers, like 72%, in the last 72 hours, about 85% of the bookings will happen. It's very, very last minute. Many emerging markets are, but Indonesia is also one of them. So if I have 4 or 5 properties in 1 square kilometer, and if I have all my bookings coming in the last 72 hours, and my starting price is $9.90, we advertise as $9.90, like Jetstar or AirAsia does, then I have to make sure that my last 4 rooms are selling at 39.90, right? So we
Right.
have a machine learning or a self-learning AI algorithm which prices the properties, all 4 of them, relative to each other's occupancy and make sure that the prices keep going up to the level that it is gives the maximum yield to all 4 properties. And
Wow.
the one of the most interesting insights we found is that most booking engine site would close reservations for the same night at 12 midnight. But we would have like 30, 40 rooms customers wanting to book past midnight. So we then allowed them to book till 4 a.m. for the same night. And so we kept going deeper and deeper in our series and our analysis to figure out what is the use case which you want to solve. So if you are 150 meters from our property and you have our app, so we've kind of geo fenced you, our property will know that you are reaching our property in 2 minutes. That Mr. J is 2 minutes away or 5 minutes away. The property can never say that, oh, Mr. J never came to our property and pocket the cash. And so these are the kind of small stuff which we've done, which we did in the early days to kind of nail down the use cases, so that when we start expanding into the region, into the other places, we have a business model which is like well oiled. We understand exactly what happens. So everything, and this whole, from the pricing to SAP implementation, which is the banking financial software, is a fully automated process. No human intervention required.
Wow. That's incredible. Wow. So I'm learning a whole lot here right now about Indonesia specifically. You mentioned three separate things that really caught my attention. The first was the fact that the majority of people are Android users, and so this is something that is very country specific, region specific, and obviously you need to do some pretty deep research, which it sounds like you have been doing. The second thing that was interesting to me was the credit card and payment setup that you have. So a very low percentage of people actually book online with credit cards, and then I really like the way that you have almost a reward system, or an incentive system, that if say you no show, then you get penalized by having to pay at time of booking for your next 2 or 3 bookings. So I think that's very clever. And then finally, sort of, I think the last thing is basically again, like you said, every country is very, very nuanced in how the customer, basically executes or uses your service. And something as simple as your check-in time or checkout time and that sort of thing. It makes perfect sense that it needs to be sort of country specific, based on the demographic and how the pattern, the human patterns of that country are. And I think it's fascinating because I think that a lot of companies that are trying to expand globally, and they try to take one model that worked in one country, that usually a Western country, and they think that they could just replicate that. But obviously, as you just explained, it's extremely nuanced. So I'm fascinated, and it sounds like you guys have done a lot of deep analysis and deep work in Indonesia, and it's been very, very successful for you. So congratulations on that. I also read that you have recently raised a little bit more money, and you did your A round, and so you're kind of in between A and B. Um, what are your plans for that? What's your expansion plans? I mean, it sounds like you have Indonesia pretty much on lockdown and figured out. Where else are you guys thinking about expanding to?
Yeah, so I think Philippines, where we already are, Singapore is the next country where we also double down and increase a lot of our inventory. And if you probably noticed in this round of funding, we also raised money from some very seasoned investors who got deep understanding of the China market. And
Mm,
so FNH is one of them. They were early stage investors in the China Lodging Group. I think they were the angel investors there. Our current investors, one of our current investors was an angel investor in the Orange Hotel Group, which also got acquired recently.
right.
And Hendale, which is out of Hong Kong, was another of our investors in the last round. So the basic idea for us was to try and get as much expertise, which is cross country, cross functional, and also emerging markets, but all which has scaled up to the level of China to kind of continue and fuel our growth. So current expansion plans for this year continue to be these three countries, but you never know. We are fairly opportunistic by nature, and we've been also called scrappy by a few folks. So we can anything can happen, but the plans are to double down on these three markets, and to continue to focus to kind of dominate, or at least be at the pole position in each of these markets.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you're focusing on Indonesia, Singapore, and Philippines, you've obviously done, again, extensive research there and see the opportunities and the growth there. What do you see as sort of the 5-10 year picture in Southeast Asia, specifically to sort of the industry and the sector that you're in right now?
So sorry, are you saying the 5 year picture?
Yeah, I mean, 5 year picture, 5 to 10 year picture in sort of the travel, leisure space. Are there any big trends that you see that are just jumping out at you, that you're trying to sort of get that pole positioning for?
Yeah. So a couple of things, right? When you are very, very focused on the domestic traveler in an emerging market, so your typical emerging domestic traveler is young, is he or she is between 24 and 30 years old,
Mm,
and has a propensity to travel a lot, because these are not the people who will save for their 60s. They want to travel, they want to backpack, they want to see the world. In a city like Jakarta, when it rains a lot and there's a traffic jam, there's a spike in occupancy. So that means that people do value their comfort over money, and they would rather stay and go back to office the next day rather than get stuck in a traffic jam of 3 or 4 hours.
right.
So what we've also noticed that these customers, and we've been reading about this in several similarish kind of models which have happened in a few countries, including China, that these customers do get wealthy over a period of time, and the brand has to continue to cater to their aspirations as they grow older and wealthier in their journey. So I think what the way we will look at it is there's a large domestic travel market. 92% of our customers are domestic, and when they continue to become more successful in their careers, we would be offering them products which are commensurate with their status. And I think the other thing which we find very very fascinating is that they're extremely social. Therefore, a social engagement with them has to be absolutely phenomenal. Just to quote a couple of numbers, I was meeting with the Facebook Southeast Asia head and the travel team today. In Philippines, social media consumption is 4.5 hours a day, and in Indonesia, an opens Instagram 28 times a day. So these are like mind blowing trends, right? It kind of reinforces the fact that we have to be local and social, and we have to be an intersection, and keep up with the trends of what the local folks are doing. So travel market is absolutely exploding in the region. The youngsters are traveling more and more. It is one of the fastest growing markets worldwide. In fact, Indonesia hotel market is almost as big as the India hotel market, and nobody really knows this with right research.
Wow.
And I think it's a great opportunity. It's undercapitalized, but things are changing rapidly in that sphere. A lot of Chinese investment coming into the region. So I think it's going to be good. If there's no macro issues, which happen. All these countries are growing steadily quarter on quarter for the last several quarters. I mean, you've seen Indonesia's growth and Philippines' growth. I think the future is quite bright.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I mean, it's not just because I'm also based in Asia, sitting in Hong Kong, but, I mean, just looking from sort of a top-down perspective, Asia EM particularly just looks like it has a long runway ahead of it. So I think you're well positioned in a very good space to capture a lot of this growth. So we're definitely going to be looking forward to seeing your progress. Amit, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure catching up with you and learning a lot about your business and about Indonesia and how things in Southeast Asia work. So thank you again. What is the best place that our listeners can find you or follow you or connect with you? I'm not sure if you're on social media personally or anything like that, but if they want to learn a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so the company is on social media everywhere. I'm personally on both Twitter and on LinkedIn. My handle is Amit Saberwal. That's my full name. And yeah, I'm always available there.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you the best of luck, Amit. And again, we're looking forward to following your company and your story closely to see your success in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jay, for your time too. And maybe see you soon sometime at a Red.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes and links can be found over at jkimshow.com. Come back often and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to join us next week for another exciting episode of The J Kim Show. I'd love to hear your comments. You can find me on Twitter at jkimmer, JAYKIMMER. See you guys next week. This podcast is brought to you by Hack Your Fitness, the high achiever's guide to getting ripped in under 3 hours a week. If you're anything like me, you're probably working a full-time job or jobs and trying to find time to balance family life, social life, and last but not least, fitness. Look, I get it. I'm a full-time investor and entrepreneur myself, and father of two. So how am I able to stay fit year-round without spending hours and hours in the gym killing myself on the cardio machine? After struggling for the last 15 years trying every workout and diet under the sun, I finally designed a system that allows me to achieve and maintain single-digit body fat for life in under 3 hours a week. Cardio not required. Head on over to hackyour.fitness and download my free 13-page guide that teaches you the simple science behind efficient fitness and smart nutrition and gives you everything you need to know to finally take control of your life. That's hackyour.fitness.